Hello, everybody. You're listening to Jae Has Questions. I'm your host, Sam J. Thank you so much for jumping in on this podcast. I appreciate your ears listening to these interviews. They've been a blast. I hope you're enjoying the videos as well. I'm going to be putting out more categories of the videos that I'm shooting. So, for example, if there's a series of just these are just advice to starting comedy. That's going to be one channel. Then there's going to be another one about maybe moving to LA or just different things. I'd like to just organize everything at some point for next year so that people can go back and enjoy. My guest today is Barry Neal, also known as the Counselor of Love. He's a stand-up comedian originally from Chicago, and we met, well, our paths crossed, I like saying that, at a comedy show. I went and saw him perform at the Pachanga Casino with my mom and stepdad, and he was hilarious. Had a presence to him, and after the show, he was extremely nice. I went up to him and introduced myself, and I said I was a comedian. I really enjoyed your performance. So all I did was just ask Barry, hey, can I talk to you on my podcast? He said yes, did a little bit of light Googling, found out he wrote a book called How to Get Started and Manage Your Stand-Up Comedy Career, Inside the Serious Business of Comedy. And I immediately reached out to him, bought the book. I'm making my way through it, and in the interview, I told him the one thing I made sure to do was forget everything I thought I knew about stand-up and just come into this book and this conversation as a clean slate and just take it all in. I really wanted to get these hacks from a 30-plus year veteran in comedy, and I hope that I asked the right questions, and I look forward to talking to Barry again. So without further ado, please enjoy the episode. All right. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I've been enjoying the book, and
Great.
it's been fun to reread it from the perspective of no perspective. Do you know what I mean? Getting
I do.
Forgetting everything that I quote unquote know about stand-up comedy, and sort of re-experiencing it. So I definitely enjoyed the sections on uh, you know, finding a buddy at the open mics. It seems basic, but for someone like me, you get used to just going to mics and you don't really talk to all the people. It's kind of just like, hey, how are you? What's up? And you get and you go.
Yeah, the open mics, I always say they're good learning experience, they're good stepping stone. But like I say in the book, if you can find somebody there that's simpatico, that you feel actually has the ability and the drive to get to the next level, that's the person you want to hang out with. Because 90% of those people at open mics are never going to make a living at it, which is okay. But if you want to be that 10% that actually wants to move forward, try to find that one or two people and hang out, talk ideas. That's important. Birds of a feather, that so to speak.
Yeah, so I know that you started in Chicago. You have your Chicago hat on. What was just briefly talk about like starting in Chicago and that scene, and maybe
Yeah, I
what?
started when I was really young. I was in college, and it was something that I just started wanting to do. And there were open mics, and it's hard. You're 18, 19 years old, and trying to perform late at night in front of 15 drunk people. But you learn your chops. My brother was with me at the time, so it was nice because I had a friend and a brother start. And then I went to Northwestern and really got into comedy doing a show called the Meow Show, which was kind of the big show on campus. There was a lot of improv, but it really taught me a lot about comedy and writing. And some of the alums there that got out of it are Julie Louis-Dreyfus, Dermot Mulroney, George Newbern, David Schwimmer. So it was kind of a thrill to be in that show. And then that kind of launched me coming out here and doing more stand-up.
Okay, and I liked in your book you talked about coming out into LA, and maybe not this exact phrasing, but what I took from it was the distractions of everything else out here. And I think you put it like, I just want to be the best stand-up comedian I can be. There,
Yeah.
like you gave that advice, just do your stand-up, because everything else can kind of lead from just being a great stand-up comedian.
Yeah, it's
And
kind
that,
of these stay in your lane. And
yeah.
I can't remember who told me this, but he said it might have been Bud Friedman, who was the owner of the Improv. And he said, if you're the best at anything, they'll let you do everything. So, it's like Jerry Seinfeld. It's like, he can't act, and he'll be the first to admit it, but he was the best stand-up. So they're like, yeah, you can have your own show and you can just play Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And that's really the key is if you're the jack of all trades, the people forget the end of that, which is you're the master of none. So when people go, I'm a screenwriter, I'm an actor, I'm this, I'm that, again, I'm going to make sports analogies all throughout this interview, I'm sure.
Right.
But if you have two quarterbacks on your team, you have none. If you're telling me that you have two quarterbacks that can play, that you don't know which one is better, then you really have no quarterbacks.
Gotcha. So specialized and whatnot.
Yeah, people at Green Bay know Aaron Rodgers is the man. That's it. The end of story.
They don't care about the second or the third guy.
Yeah, if you have to get to the second and third guy, we know we're in trouble. So if you're the best stand-up out there, you dictate your own price. That's the other thing too. Is like, great comics dictate their price, because comics are like, how much should I get paid? This and that. And I go, the market. The great thing about our free market is that the market will dictate what you deserve to get paid. And if you can bring in 1,000 people who are willing to pay $30, $40 a pop, then you're going to get, like Fluffy does, 6 figures.
Yeah.
If you can't bring anybody, then you get whatever people are willing just to offer you.
Yeah, I heard something crazy about Sebastian. He's been the highest paid stand-up comedian, and he only does stand-up. He's not in LA doing, sitcoms or whatnot. His payment is coming from, people buying $100 tickets to see him in a theater. And it's such an interesting thing that people, they're voting with their wallet, as my uncle talks about like that. But
Brian Regan is the same. You know who Brian Regan is?
Yeah.
He's probably one of the best working stand-ups. Seinfeld said he's the best technical stand-up out there. And he's been offered so many shows, and he just goes, I don't want to do it. I just want to do stand-up. And, there's a guy, again, making, a lot of money for every show he does. So he just picks the shows he wants to do. And he's great. I mean, we're thrilled we have him up in Lancaster. He's our last show of the year here at the Performing Arts Center.
Oh, that's great. And I know you are a producer for the Antelope Valley Comedy Festival. When was the first one, or is this how recent?
We did it. We did it recently in September. So that was our inaugural kickoff.
Great.
And my company books the Performing Arts Center here in Lancaster, and we had done this festival about 4 times in Laughlin, and it was a big success. We had everyone from Jay Leno, Larry the Cable Guy, Dana Carvey. And it was great because Laughlin's a great comedy town, but I thought I'd bring it to Lancaster, and it sold out. We had Felipe Esparza was the main headliner.
Great.
And, what was very exciting for us was having the $10,000 comedy competition. When great comics from around the country come out and compete, it was so much fun.
Yeah, because comedians are normally competing for either two drinks or some
exactly right. Yeah. What do I get if I win? You get a free meal. Woohoo! So that was great.
So $10,000 purse. That's great.
10,000. It got divided 7,500 to the winner, and then 15 to the second, and 1,000. But all top 12 people were guaranteed work as well. So out of the 40, 12 of them at least got a couple of weeks of work through my company. So the talent level was incredible. We had industry people there, and people got signed that weekend. So that's really what we really wanted to do, is promote great comedy, have comics come out, meet the industry that's going to help them get to that next level where, they can start dictating their terms and making more money.
Yeah. And I really like the pieces on here. Your book is titled How to Get Started and Manage Your Stand-Up Comedy Career. And the section that I got some enjoyment out that I read recently was just about professionalism. And that section is something that you would think would be obvious to people.
Yeah. Every couple weeks I get the head shaker where I just go, I don't know how you function in everyday life being so incompetent. It's just, the profession. People forget, everyone has lives. So when I get a phone call going, hey, how long is it going to take me to get to the Pechanga Casino? And I'm like, I don't know. Are you walking? Are you riding your bicycle? Get
Yeah.
on the internet and figure it out. Just things like that. Or they have headshots that are in black and white. It's like, what is this, 1965? Get a color headshot. It's just little things that just they do that, unfortunately derail some early careers, because there's people that are funny we just can't work with because they're just so unprofessional.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of experiences with people who are really talented and funny, but they often shoot themselves in the foot, just on simple things like that, or whether it's a
Yeah.
personality trait, or, or maybe how they say certain things to people. But I mean, the reason that you have this experience is because you have made that mess up. I mean, you unfortunately had to fly to Buffalo for a gig.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about just why? I mean, this is all coming from having experience, so that's what the
it's the experience of the School of Hard Knocks, is that I had been booked for a club in Buffalo, and got my plane ticket and was very excited to go out there. And I flew out the day, I think the day of, or maybe the day before, and I went to the club and it was closed. And I'm like, I met somebody who was at the bar who was, and I'm like, why does it say closed? And they're like, we closed 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, nobody called me. And they're like, yeah, they took off with the money. Okay. And I was just stuck in Buffalo for a couple of days till I could get a flight back. And yeah, that was brutal. I mean, there's a book out there called Road Stories. And I mean, everybody has them.
Everybody has something.
Whew, yeah, there's some road stories where you just go, wow, I don't know how I escaped that one. Yeah.
So now I saw you perform at Pachanga, and
Yeah.
how often are you traveling? Are you
Now that I'm
stay in Southern California? I know you have kids.
yeah, I have kids, and as I'm looking at the podcast, I'm like, wow, who's that old guy you're interviewing? So I don't travel as much. I did it for 30 years. I started when I was 21. So I've done it. I love it. I got to a certain point, but I think at some point you have to start being realistic with your expectations. I got to the point where I got a production deal. NBC liked the show that I do. As you know, I go by the Counselor of Love. So it just didn't work out, which is that's fine. I got as far as I felt I could. I don't want to be on the road when I'm 60 years old at clubs. That's just not what I want to do.
Yeah.
My passion is, kind of, again, like that athlete who starts out when they're really young. I used to be the youngest guy in the room, and now I'm one of the older guys in the room. So I want to be that mentor to young comics. And that's why I started the company. I still travel, like I do Pachanga. I'll do other clubs. I'll do corporate and some performing arts centers. But, the idea of performing for, 18 to 25-year-olds is not something that is my wheelhouse nor my real interest. So, but I love still teaching. I'm actually teaching a course starting in January.
Okay, can you just go over do you go through the book in the class, or what's your?
We talk about how to find your voice. So a little bit of stuff in the book, but I really try to limit it. I used to teach years ago, and the reason I got into teaching was so many people who are teaching comedy don't do comedy, and I find that offensive. It's like, listen, I like music. I'm not going to teach music. I can't sing, and I don't know what a note is. So it's like the idea that you're going to teach stand-up but don't do it was offensive to me. So I started teaching, but what I found is too many people got involved who are like, I'm the funny guy at the water cooler, and the guys I'm not interested. I'm interested in people who want to do serious stand-up, get to the next level. So I limit it to 8 comics, and it's about the professionalism, how to get from point A to point B, how to write and make it funny. I think the biggest mistake young comics make is they take too long getting to the joke. Sometimes I'll watch videos and I'll go, I watched 5 minutes of what should have been a 2-minute set.
Now, what do you think that is? I mean, is it a protection from getting to that punchline? As long as you're setting up, you don't have the you're not exposing yourself to the lackluster delivery, or I mean, I can definitely.
Yeah, it's a great question. What is it? I think that's why you need writing partners sometimes, and sometimes you just need to hear. And I believe it was Seinfeld that ultimately said, watch how technically deft he is, and every word is important. So what you do is you figure out where's the funny, where's the punchline, and every word eventually has to fit one of 2 categories. One, it has to be funny, the word, or two, it has to advance the story in a critical way. If that word doesn't do it, get it out. And it's the same thing with even a sentence. If the sentence doesn't advance the story in a critical way, get it out. It's the same thing with writing a book or a screenplay. Sometimes long movies that are 3.5 hours, you're just like, why did we even need that whole subplot or that scene? And I think sometimes it's just people's ego. Oh, I really like it. Or, oh, it's interesting to me. For stand up, it's got to be funny or critical to the story. If not, get it out.
So the little bit about the podcast that I've been doing, I think you're the 19th or 20th guest I've had on. So it's been a fun process, and it originally started because I wanted to interview other either stand-ups or feature film directors and sort of find out not just like where they started and what they're working on, but also the sort of more mindful side of it, as far as how do you keep creative? When do you know that you're sort of at the end of your rope and you need some sort of refresher? And for you, what would you say is, when you maybe hit your limit in comedy, you're like, I need to take maybe a palate cleanse and do something else?
They're great questions, by the way. I think when you're playing the same club over and over and making the same money, in other words, you're not generating heat in terms of people going, oh, I have to go see this person. I think you start getting really jaded. And I saw it happening with a lot of my friends who are comics. They just keep doing the same thing over and over. And it's like, it's the definition of insanity. It's like you're doing the same thing, but not getting a different result. You're just going, you're making your money. And I think I realized probably, 15 years ago, after I had the production deal and it didn't happen, I went back to the club scene and I'm just like, why am I doing this? I got to the point where I wanted to get to. I got my swing. It's like all you can ask for is the chance. You get to the majors, give me a chance. And I got my chance. It didn't happen. And I can live with that. I can always live with, trying your best. And, I tell my kids that. Did you have kids as well, Sam, or not yet?
No, I don't. I'm a big
kid. Yeah, yes. So am I. My kids, I embarrass my kids every single day. It's so sad. They're like, Dad, try to be more mature. I'm like, what?
They're like, you hit your swing, Dad. Calm down.
Yeah, I always say, just do your best. And again, it goes back to sports. I played a lot of sports. I traveled, and I always thought, what? If I played the best game I could play, I can live with not winning. It killed me, and I got mad, but I could live with myself knowing I prepared the best I could. I gave it the best I could, and that's all you can do. And that's with comedy. I think that's what you ultimately have to do. If you do cinema, because I know you're a film guy, try to put the best film you can together. And if you get to the point where you're just, you're doing schlock, why? Ask yourself, at the end of your career, are you going to look back and go, wow, I'm really proud of that? And that's why I started my company. I started the festival, because I feel like there's that circle of life that, I happen to have it in my act, but it's like, you start life and you live it and you do the best you can. And then on the downside of it, you just go start giving back, and to me, if I can help somebody get to that next level, that's awesome. I'm happy being the mentor now. That's kind of my role now.
Totally. That's great. I really liked hold on, I had to post it, the style section in your book and talking about voice and originality. From what I understand, you had sort of, I don't want to say branded, but your act sort of started to form when you realized, hey, I'm talking a lot about relationships, whether it's from your marriage, getting married, and you realize, hey, this could be sort of, what I'm talking about. I mean, that you became the counselor, or is the counselor of love, or the doctor of love? Which one do you prefer?
The counselor of love. That's how I branded it. And it was because the truth is, people go to a comedy club, they're drinking, they're not going to remember your name. There's just they're going to go out and go, hey, remember that guy we saw a couple of weeks ago? Who was it? Oh, I don't know. He was a guy. He talked about what, but they'll remember, hey, yeah, that's the guy that kept talking about relationships. He was the counselor of something, counselor of love. And it was so easy to remember and brand. So everything I would sell, every merch would say counselor of love, counselor of love. And that's how the TV show kind of got pitched.
Oh, gotcha.
So, you want to give yourself a branding. I mean, that's the whole point of all companies is you want that brand name recognition. So you try to find your voice. And to me, you find your voice by talking about things that are important to you, and I could always tell when comics are up there, just trying to get a laugh with whatever. And that's, to me, that's bubble gum. It's, you chew it for a minute, you enjoy it, you laugh, but it has no lasting flavor.
Yeah. I have a stand-up comedian friend that I started with. His name is Quincy. And we'd always joke, we'd be in the back of a mic or something, and we're watching a comic waiting to go up, and he leans over and he goes, yeah, they're, if they're doing well, they're doing good, but like, could you see them do an hour?
Yeah.
Like what would this really be? And
Yeah, that's true.
that's the bubble
Absolutely.
gum. I mean, they might be doing well, but yeah, it comes down to that substance. Like, what would this be? And for the most part, you're like, I would not want to see an hour. No, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, people always say, I have an hour of material. Can I headline? And I go, I don't know. Just because you have an hour of material doesn't make you a headliner. To me, a headliner, a good one, is somebody that can carry the show if it's not going well prior. If the opener and feature don't do great, it comes down to the headliner. And it's like, look, you got to bail out the show. And 45 minutes of just, jokes, random stuff, that's not enough. You've got to be so memorable. That's what makes a great headliner. It's like, wow, that carried the day. And again, I go back to sports. It's like, look, you can be having a crappy 58 minutes, but if you got a quarterback in the last 2 minutes that can finish the game and drive for his touchdown, that's why you pay that guy. And that's why headliners make the money they do, because they're the guy that can, when I say guy, they're the comedian that can save the show. And I've been part of it on both ends, from when I was the opener, feature, and now headliner, where it's just like the show's just not going great, the audience isn't into it, but that headliner, whether it's me or when I was younger, another act, and they just crushed it. And it's like people will leave happy as long as the headliner does well, inevitably. No one's going to walk out of a great headlining show and go, oh, that headliner was great, I'm so disappointed that opener wasn't funny. They don't care.
Yeah. It's not even on their radar.
No, it's not even on the radar.
I had a couple other, so let's see, performing. For the people who have no idea what it's like to headline, myself included, what is performing to a good audience for that headlining set versus a bad audience? Like, what makes it that slight difference? You mentioned, 58 minutes of struggling, but the last two, is it something in the material, or is it like, how often do you, I guess I have a couple, how often do you maybe sway from that headlining set to get them back? You're like, you're always adjusting. What's
yeah
in your head?
Again, a good quarterback and a good comic will audible. And for me, I can always sense, and most headliners will tell you 1 minute into the show how good the audience is going to be, because their first joke is going to be one of their stronger ones. So if that first joke doesn't land the way we expect it to, we know we're in for a bumpy ride, which means you start adjusting, going, I'm lowering my expectations for certain jokes that are going to get an applause break may just get a big laugh. The big laughs may become medium laughs, and medium laughs become smaller laughs. So your expectations sort of get metered by the show. There's so many factors, Sam, that go into this too. You also want to know, where are the good people in the audience, because sometimes there are pockets of really good people in the audience that are there, they're intent, they're listening. Others they're there for a bachelorette party, they got their own agenda. So you focus on those good people and make sure they're having a good time, because the last thing you want to do is focus on the people that aren't invested, because then you're going to lose the ones that are.
Gotcha.
So sometimes you bring the show inwards a little bit and just go, look, let's say there's a room of 100 people and there's 30 people that are vested and the rest are doing whatever. You hunker down with those 30 people and go, hey, follow me. I'll lead this show. We're going to have a great time. If the other 70 jump on board, great. If not, then the 30 of us will have a great time.
That's great.
Most shows should go well. The only times a lot of times it doesn't. And I hate saying this, but it's usually not the comic's fault. A good headliner, it's just not their fault, because we've done this 1,000 times. So I know 1,000 times it's going well. So if it doesn't go well, it could be bad seating. It could be bad sound. It could be bad lighting. It could be people are there for free and there's ambient noise. There's a lot of factors that go into stand-up that can really bring down a show. And I've seen the best headliners not do well. I mean, I've seen guys that I think are hilarious and they just have rotten shows for a myriad of reasons that have nothing to do with their comedy.
Wow. That's I mean, I'm gonna have to re-listen to that because that was some gold right there, Barry. I want to be sensitive of your time, and I have just a few more questions for you.
No worries.
Developing new material. Now, it sounds like once you do find that, whether it's a character or you're sort of where you're operating, it's either like, how do you test that new material? Are you always writing from that perspective, as if you're just putting on these relationship glasses? Is that how you're generating more and more material once you have your act?
For me, and I generate material from truth. It's like usually, now, do things literally have to be true? Of course not. You take a germ of what people recognize as the truth or your truth, and you exaggerate, you fine tune. My wife always kids me. She goes, "You're the only guy that can go to AM, PM, be gone for 5 minutes and have a 20-minute story." Because I exaggerate, I give characters, I say things that may not have happened. I extrapolate, but for me, it has to come from a true place, because if you care about something, that's gonna come out. And I always tell that to comics. If you don't care about your material, how can you make the other people care?
Yeah.
So it's got to be interesting to you. In my comedy class, I always tell comics, I can make anything that is interesting funny, but I can't take something funny and necessarily make it interesting. And that's where audiences will really be vested in you, because they don't want to just hear funny. They want to meet interesting. They want to meet a new friend. So for 60 minutes, they want to get to know you. So when I say develop material, talk about things that are important to you. Airline food may be funny, but is it really important? Do you really have a take on it that's so original and different? Now, Seinfeld did it because he was able to find the minutia in everything. So for him, that was true to him. You don't know anything about him personally because that's the way he does his material. But
yeah.
what he is anal retentive and so focused on the minutia and the nonsense that's important to him. And that's where people kind of go, yes, God, he's right. How does he see that? Because he observes. So I always tell comics, talk about things that are important to you, that you really care about. And it could be anything.
Wow. Barry, I'm going to rip up my notebook and find some more interesting stuff to talk about.
Listen, people will follow you. I always say it's like going to a party. The guy with the lampshade on his head may be funny for 2 minutes, but he's got a lampshade on his head. The person who really is interesting and will take people's attention is the person who's they care about what they're talking about, and you can feel it, you can sense it, and that energy brings people towards you. And it's the same thing with stand-up. When you care and it's important to you, people sense it. They sense bull. Can I say bullshit?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. People can sense the bullshit. And if you're trying to do a character or you're trying to do something to elicit laughter that's not really true to you, they smell right through it. They smell a bullshit artist. So talk about what's important to you.
That's perfect. Last question for you, Barry. I feel like I want to I have more, but I want to keep reading through the book, and I feel like that's where you laid it out. It's so clear. I like how specific it was and how practical. The last question, it's a fun one I like to ask my guests. It's called the life billboard. If you had a billboard on the intersection of, in Hollywood, La Cienega and Sunset Boulevard, and you could have anything on the billboard, a phrase, an image, a quote, what would you have on your billboard?
Wow, that's a great question. I wish I had time to prep for that.
Put you on the spot. Shoot.
Yeah, what would I have on that billboard? Stay true to yourself. I guess if someone pushed me to it, I tell my kids, you may not love what I have to say, but I don't bullshit you. So stay true to yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. I am who I am. I try to be kind. I try to do the right thing. I'm not perfect at it, but be true to who you are, and don't do. don't try to be a sycophant, and don't try to please people, because honestly, nothing is worse than someone who's always trying to please. You could be a people pleaser because that's your natural state, but be who you are and let people come to you. That's what a leader is.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time, Barry.
Hey,
It's
no problem.
it's such a pleasure talking with you, and getting to read your stuff, see you perform. I definitely look up to you, and I'm considering wearing a tie on stage.
Hey, only if it's true to you. It's so funny because that is certainly part of the character of the Counselor of Love. But yeah, if you saw me off stage, my wife was like, "Can you at least wear something nice?" And I'm like, "What? I got a bear sweatshirt. What's wrong with that?" So anytime. This has been so much fun, Sam. I wish you all the best, and
Thank you.
I love talking comedy. And like I said, if you ever have questions or whatever, my email is always open to you.
Thank you so much, Barry. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, buddy.
Let's write some jokes.
All right, sounds good.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
What a freaking dude, huh? Professional. I love talking to Barry. I look forward to talking to him again. Thank you so much for listening. Go ahead and check out Barry's work on YouTube. You can search Barry Neal. All right, thank you so much for listening. This has been Sam Jae Has Questions. I'm your host, Sam Jae. Look forward to next week's. I got a doozy, and let's see, some shows coming up. This is coming out on Friday, November 8th, but set your dates, because next week, the 12th, I'll be performing at Artsy Farty stand-up show at the Art Click Pro Art Gallery. That is in downtown. And the show, let's pull this up. The show starts at 7 p.m. and I'll put a link to the description. Looks like we got some great comics on the show. And then the 13th is Royale's sketch show at the Pack Theater at 8 p.m. So come on out to that, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening, guys.